Hello, my name is Nathaniel Dodson. Welcome into this Adobe Illustrator tutorial brought to you, as always, by tutvid.com. Today we're going to take a look at creating a low poly piece of artwork from this sketch. Can you see that? Is it coming out clearly on camera? We got this sketch from an iPhone, or I guess an iPhone or Android app called Namoo. It looks pretty cool. I'm not really sure what the app does, but the icon is really sick looking. So we're going to create our own sort of variation of that and explore how to create low poly artwork in Adobe Illustrator. As I always say, guys, if you enjoy this tutorial, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also turn notifications on. That's a helpful little thing. Make sure you never miss one of these tutorials in the future. All right, let's jump into Illustrator now and check this thing out. All right, here we are in Adobe Illustrator. What I want to do is jump over to my Finder and just drag the sketch into Illustrator. I just scan this sketch into my computer. You can use your iPhone, whatever you want, to just get this sketch from wherever you've sketched it, or download the sketch. You can download it. There's going to be a link down in the bio. Get the sketch into Illustrator because it's what we're going to be using here to create the artwork. I'm going to go up to View, and I'm going to make sure my bounding box is turned on. Yours probably is. I just shut mine off for a project I was working on. And now I'm going to hold down Shift and just drag this image up, maybe to about right there, and maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger even. Why not make it a little bit bigger? Something kind of like that. That's cool. We'll make this tree right in the middle, and once I've done that, I can just lock this layer up. So I'm going to hit the little space between the eyeball and the colored bar, lock that layer up. We can name it if we want. We really don't have to. I'm going to create a new layer, and this is where we're going to begin creating artwork. So just before we begin drawing anything, I just want to kind of show you how I'm going to break this down. We're going to draw the ground first, then I'm going to draw the sort of tree trunk and this little tree branch, and then I'm going to do the bulk of the leaves, and then we'll add these little rocks and node-looking things to the tree afterward. So let's begin here drawing the ground first. In fact, I think I'm going to name this layer Ground. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my pen tool, and we're going to get ourselves a nice thick stroke. No fill yet. We'll work on fills in a little bit, but I'm going to go with the stroke. So I'm going to double-click stroke, and I'm going to give it like a blue stroke, something that's very noticeable, and maybe I'll make it like 2 or 3 points, pretty big. Now, before we even start drawing, one thing you absolutely want to make sure you do is turn on Smart Guides. It just makes this step so fast and easy, and they're just really helpful. So what I like to do is begin drawing just a single triangle anywhere. So remember, we're working with the ground. In fact, I'm going to take the ground all the way out to like the edges of the document. This black line is the edge of my document. So I'm going to go with like a big triangle, like right here. So I'm just going to go triangle, boom. And the bigger your triangles, probably the better off you're going to be because it'll just be less drawing for you to do later on. Then from this triangle, I'm going to draw another triangle, but what I need to do is hold down my Shift key. And when you do that, you can hover over an existing anchor point and drop a new anchor point exactly on top of that. And Smart Guides, by the way, Smart Guides will help you do this perfectly every single time. So hold down Shift, and I'm going to click there to begin drawing another triangle. I'm going to draw this triangle out here. Boom, just like that. And now we're beginning to build a grid. Now I'm going to hold down Shift right here, and I'm going to bring my first triangle up to meet the ground. There we go, and make sure I join it off. Cool. And then I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to make a triangle that comes all the way across, maybe to like here, and then loops back in. So it's a very thin triangle, but we're beginning to create that horizon. Very cool. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to create another sort of horizon triangle here. You can see, there we go. Very nice. And now I want to continue kind of bringing this horizon out. So I'm going to hold down Shift here. I'm going to draw a triangle that looks kind of like that. And you can see, just like this, we can very quickly and effectively draw out the entire grid for the ground. And now I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to draw one final triangle. Maybe I'll have it come way over like that. And then I'll bring it all the way back over, just so we kind of stay true to our whole triangle shape thing here. I need to come into here, draw a few triangles this way, just to complete the foreground of our ground. Hold down Shift, and that's just, again, allowing me to create an anchor point right on top of another anchor point. You can see very quickly we're creating this really complex grid. Very cool. There we go. And don't worry about all this extra stuff down here. We're going to mask all of that away at the end of this whole thing, so no need to worry about that. Hold down Shift. Let's click on that anchor point. Let's go right up there. Bam, just like that. Very cool. Hold down Shift again, and let's create the triangle that's going to go here behind the tree trunk. And if you're having a difficult time, by the way, the sketch is too heavy, you can always double-click on that layer and just choose Dim Images to like 50%, something like that. So that makes it a lot easier to see our lines. That's actually, maybe should have done that a little earlier. Now I'm going to hold down Shift again, and, well, I'm not going to do anything because we still have our layer 1 selected. Go back to the ground layer. Now hold down Shift, and let's draw another piece of the ground plane. There we go. And let's draw out another triangle like here. Make a triangle about that size. That looks good. Let's create another triangle, maybe like this. All right, cool. Something like that looks good. Hold down Shift. Let's create a triangle that's going to, we've set ourselves up for trouble here. I'm going to undo this, actually. We're going to get rid of that. That last triangle we made wasn't maybe the best way to create that triangle, so let's try this again. Let's hold down Shift. Let's create a triangle that goes like this and brings us up a little bit closer to our ground plane. Hold down Shift, and now we'll come through and fill in this triangle underneath here. Don't be afraid to undo and get rid of a triangle if you realize it's just not going to give you the shape that you want. That's totally fine. It happens. It happens all the time, in fact. There we go. And I'm going to continue drawing out some triangles, triangles on top of triangles on top of triangles. And then I think I'm going to complete my effect. Well, I'm not quite going to complete it here. We got one giant triangle there. Whoops. And then I'm going to hold down Shift, and we're going to draw one final really long triangle right there. So what we now have are a bunch, whoops, I don't want to create a new shape. What we now have are a bunch of triangles as our ground plane. So our ground is set. In fact, if we shut off the tree, you can see there's the ground plane. And on top of this little hill that we've created, we're going to draw the tree. I'm going to turn the sketch for the tree back on. We're going to create a new layer. In fact, I'm going to lock the ground layer so we don't accidentally damage it. I'm going to call this tree. In fact, maybe I should call it trunk, but I'm going to stick with tree. And what I'm going to do here for the tree is I'm not really going to low poly this too much. We're just going to create a shape that's about the outline of our little tree trunk. So I'm going to bring it up here, maybe to like right around there. But see how it's giving me all these intersecting points? I'm going to go up to View. I'm going to temporarily shut off Smart Guides just to kind of free me up for a second. I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to come up to here, and then up to here. And by the way, I'm dropping these points here because I can see my lines are going to intersect with anchor points there. So we have a line coming out of that part of the branch, and the same for there. It's just going to give us a nice place for our shapes to kind of latch onto. So there's the tree branch, or the tree trunk, I should say. And what I now want to do is go View. I want to turn Smart Guides back on real quick because I want to create the shape down the middle of the tree. So you can see this is just, the single line, but I want Smart Guides to be turned back on because I should probably zoom in here to make this easier to see. I want to make sure that I'm lining up exactly with these anchor points because really what this is going to be, as we can see on our sketch, part of this tree trunk is going to be shaded. So this is just going to be the darker side of the tree trunk. And the Smart Guides just make sure we're creating this half of the shape exactly the same as the tree trunk was before. And then I'll just join it here. But what I want to do, I obviously want to move the path down. So I'm going to grab my direct selection tool, and I'll just select that one single anchor point, and Smart Guides will help make sure I lock it right into place. So it's just aligned perfectly. So there we go. We got the trunk and the piece that's going to become the shadow on top of the trunk. Let's draw out the branch. So once more, we're going to hold down Shift. I'm going to just draw out the branch, just kind of like this. Don't worry, I'm going into the trees, into the leafy area of the tree a bit because the leaves are going to fall on top of the trunk and the branch here, so I'm not too concerned about that. So first, we'll just draw out the full branch shape, right? Just like that. Great. And then I'll create this little triangle here on the bottom part of the branch. So hold down Shift. I'm going to come across here, link up with that anchor point, link up with that anchor point. Great. So we got the little triangle shape. And now we've got two shapes. So the rest of this branch is kind of going to be split in two. So once more, hold down Shift, and we're going to come out to about here and then bring it up to about here, and then over, and then down to this point, and then back across to our starting point. Great, there's that shape. And then the remaining piece, that's going to be just the original branch we drew. So that'll be able to kind of live and fill in that little piece that goes right in there. All right, so once again, if I double-click and bring my sketch back up to 100%, you can see that that's the darkest part of the branch because, in theory, it's going to have the most shadow cast on it from the leaves above. So we have three shapes that make up the branch and two shapes that make up the trunk. And you can see here now our tree layer has a nice rendition of what would be a very geometric, low-poly style tree trunk. So I'm going to lock that layer up, and now we're going to begin with the leaves. So let's create a new layer. Let's name this layer Leaves, and I'm going to move up to the point where we're drawing leaves. Now, the real key to drawing these leaves, I'm once again going to double-click on my sketch layer. I'm just going to dim it to 50% again. The real key to this is begin in the center. Make sure you select the leaves layer. Begin in the center and work your way out, and don't worry about making big triangles. So I'm going to do like a very big inverted triangle right here in the middle, all right, just like that. And then I'm going to hold down Shift, and let's draw out another triangle. You kind of want to try to make the triangles a little bit smaller as you get closer to the edges, all right? So with that in mind, I'm going to try to just draw out these triangles. Draw out these triangles and make them pretty decent size. But now here we're getting up closer to the edge, so I'm going to make this triangle just a little bit smaller. You can see it's still big, but it's just a little bit smaller. Same thing out here. I'm going to make this one a little bit smaller. And if you begin with the center of an object, for some reason it just makes it a lot easier than trying to work your way from very tiny edge pieces in toward much, much larger center triangles. So I prefer to work from the center out. So then I'll shift click over here. We're going to create this little triangle, right? And we're very quickly building out this grid, you can see. So now I'm going to hold down shift. I'm going to come up over here with the triangle just like that. Join that off on the end. I'll do the same thing, hold down shift. And now, obviously, because I'm getting closer to the edges, I'm making a concerted effort to just make my triangles a little bit smaller. It'll really help to add some shape and dimension to our tree leaves here. And you'll really see when we begin coloring it just how much of a difference this will make. So I'm going to bring this over this way. Voila. Hey, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here in this tutorial, well, make sure you follow me on Instagram. My handle is @tutvid. There's just lots of cool stuff over there. We do a lot of live streaming and fun stuff like that. So again, handle is @tutvid. You can find me over there on Instagram. And you can see we're getting very close to the edge here. In fact, one of these, maybe this one will reach out and touch the edge, something like that. Although it might be a little bit too big. I think it is. It's going to look a little weird. I'm going to create that small triangle there instead. Hold down shift. Let's create this nice elongated triangle here. Cool. Let's hold down shift again as we begin that shape. And, it's just this, it's kind of a long process, but it's definitely worth it of just creating triangle after triangle after triangle. I think now I'm going to reach down and touch the edge here. We're just touching with the point of a triangle. That's all right, though. We'll come back and fill all this in a little bit. Whoops, I right-click there. Make sure you don't right-click. There we go. Hold down shift once more. And I think what I'm going to do is bring this over to the edge as well. Voila. Hold down shift. I'm not quite going to bring this guy to the edge because over here especially, this is the shadow side of the tree. I want to be careful that I don't make too many triangles that even get close to being too large because that'll start to look bad kind of in a hurry. Hold down shift. I'm going to bring this over. We got a nice small triangle there. That's cool. Hold down shift. Now we're going to reach out and touch the edge here. Cool. Finish that triangle. And now what I'm going to do here is maybe bring this over this way, come back, create like this kind of skinny triangle. Hold down shift. Let's bring this triangle out this way. Very cool, which means that right here we can just bring this across, connect for the triangle that way. And then once more here, reach out and touch the edge. And now you can see how we're really beginning to fill this in all the way to the edge. We're getting the shape of our tree, and we're just roughly following the line. The line is just there as a little bit of a guide, I'm going to bring this guy over here, something like that. There we go. Hold down shift once more. These are kind of like super skinny-ish triangles. And also, see how this almost looks like a straight line? Just be careful not to get too tempted. You want to join at the anchor point corners, kind of like this, right? You don't want to try to just suck a straight line across there. You'll almost always regret it. If you just go from point to point to point, you just get a better finished product. All right, we're going anchor point to anchor point to anchor point. There we go. And then right here, see, we're going to bring this down this way and loop it through just like that. And then we're going to come across this way, join that anchor point. And then I'm going to come across here, I think kind of like this. There we go. And then we got this nice little angle that we can put on the bottom part of the tree there. Great. And then right here, we can fill this in beautifully. That's a nice little bottom part of the tree. We're going to bring this over. I think maybe we should just go with I can't go with a leaf that big on the bottom. We're going to go with something that looks like that. And then we're going to bring this guy across here and go with a nice big shaped triangle that way. And then I'm going to stretch it out to about there. We're going to come across for that little leaf on the bottom. And we'll come up to here, close that triangle off. Great. And let's see here. I think we'll make one big kind of skinny leaf shape there. And then what we can do is for the outside part of the tree, make a triangle this way and join that back across. Great. I'll come up over here. Let's give that a triangle. And then I think I'll kind of backfill this a little bit by giving this a triangle shape. Voila. And then hold down shift and let's join this across here and complete that. You can see how we're really quickly creating this grid. It's not too bad at all. A lot of little interesting caveats, as you will, as we attack every little piece of this grid. Just join this thing off and make sure we get it just perfect. And then hold down shift. Let's bring this across here to there and then join it right off. Great. So there we go. Now, it looks a little crazy because we have these really pointed, jagged edges on some parts of our lines. Don't worry about that because we're not going to leave this as a stroke. We're going to be using this as a fill. But you can see here if I shut the leaves off, or actually I should really shut the sketch off underneath, here's what we have so far. Now, what I am going to do, I'm going to speed it up because I'm going to quickly just create maybe like 2 of these rocks here on the ground. I'll leave out the weird-looking Mickey Mouse rock, and then I'll create those nodes on the tree. But I won't make you suffer through watching me do that. I'll just create a new layer here and name it nodes, and you'll see me speeding through all of this as I continue to talk, and we'll be on to the next thing here before you know it. And there it is, just some gridded out nodes. They look really weird, and they're going to look strange until we put color in them, but don't worry about that. We'll shut that off for now. What I do want to do is begin working on the leaves first, because the leaves are going to help us dictate, or determine, I should say, the color even for the ground. So I'm going to select the leaves layer here. And we want to determine our color scheme. In fact, let's do the colors for the entire thing and save them as swatches, so we can go ahead and just reference them later. I'm going to open up my swatches panel. That's not the swatches panel. Let me pop this open here. Swatches are right down here. I'll drag it out here so we can see it. I'm also going to drag my color panel out here because these are what we're going to work with. I'm going to collapse the rest of that stuff so I don't have to try to icon read anymore. What we want to do is I'm going to switch this to RGB. That's because RGB will allow me to dial in kind of my hex code here. So we're going to begin first dialing in a D2 F440. We can see it's kind of this very bright green. And then I'm going to hit the new button down here at the bottom of the swatches panel. And we can name it if we want. I'm not going to worry about naming it. And I'm going to hit OK. And you can see there it is showing up as a color. And now we're going to go RGB once more. We're going to double click on our hex code. And in this case, we're going to go 0328 0C, I believe, is kind of the dark color. And then I'll go ahead and I'll save that as a new swatch. It almost looks brown. Don't worry. It's more green than brown. And I'm going to hit OK. There it is. Those are going to be kind of our greens. And then once more, we're going to reset this to RGB. And I'm going to punch in some browns for the tree trunks. This is going to be D68 A45. So it's kind of this nice light brownish orangey color. I'm going to hit OK. We're going to go for the darker color. Once more, resetting our color to RGB. In this case, I'm going to go with 6B 472F. There we go, nice dark brown. I'm going to hit new for that, and I'm going to hit OK. So we've got our 2 leaf colors, and we've got our 2 tree trunk colors. That's great. I am going to go up here once more, and I'm going to choose RGB. Now we're going to choose the branch colors. Remember, the branch has 3 colors as well. So I've already picked all this out, so I kind of know where I'm going with this. I'm going to go 543 A29. So that's the first of the branch colors. And then I'm going to reset this to RGB, and I'm going to go with 2D231A. This is another of the branch colors. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to reset it to RGB. And now the third of the branch colors, remember the branch has 3 colors. This is going to be 140 B04. So there we go. Go ahead and commit that color, and that's an even kind of darker brown. We're going to reset it to RGB, and the last thing we need to do is just get the colors we're going to use for our nodes. So these are going to be kind of orangey colors. We're going to go F68, and let's just go with like 523. So kind of like an orangey, brightish orange color, you can see. And then for the second of the node colors, we need something that's a little bit darker than that. So let's go with like 6A to F17. There we go. That's a nice dark brownish orangey color. There we go. So you can see here we got our greens, our trunk and branch colors, and then our node colors. All right, I'm going to drag my color panel and just drop it back in place. I'll drag my swatches back to wherever they were. I think they were in here before. And we're going to unlock the leaves layer. In fact, I'm going to lock up the nodes layer just so I don't accidentally distort them. I'll probably actually shut the nodes off so I don't see them and accidentally sample or just do anything to them. I'm going to select all these triangles here, and we're going to duplicate these. So we're going to go Edit, Copy, and then we're going to choose Edit Paste in Front. And we've just duplicated everything, right? Now we're going to swap the fill and the stroke. So we're going to invert the fill and the stroke, therefore giving us this giant blue shape, but it's still a bunch of little triangles. So we want to go to our Pathfinder panel here and choose to merge these shapes. So this is going to merge it to one big tree-like shape. Now you might be saying, but what are all the little spikes sticking out? That's because underneath this shape tree, we still have our grid, because obviously we still want the grid. This is just going to be where we place our color. Now, the way we're going to get this color is by using a gradient. So I'm going to come to the gradient panel. I'm going to apply a gradient. In fact, I'm going to open up my big panel here because we're going to want our swatches here. Now, you can see it doesn't look like I've given it a gradient, and that's because I've applied the gradient to the stroke. We don't want that. I'm going to just hit the None option here, make sure fill is what's selected, and then come over here and just click on the gradient stripe in the gradient panel. Great. And from the swatches panel now, I'm going to drag the light, very bright green up to the green spot and the very, very dark green up to the dark green spot. You can see there, very light to dark green. Cool. Let's grab, well, let's first set this to a radial gradient. And then let's grab the gradient tool over here. This might be the easiest way to handle this. So if we take a peek at our sketch real quick, the light is coming from camera left. So it's striking across the scene, forming these shadows on the right side of the scene, right? The right side of our landscape, the right side of our tree trunk, the undercarriage here of the branch. All of that stuff is all shadowed because of where our light source is. So that's telling us the bright green should be up here in the top left of the tree. The darker green should reside on the other side of the bulk of the tree. So with my gradient tool, I'm going to begin drawing up here, and I'm just going to try, well, I need to make sure I select that gradient shape. I'm going to just draw a gradient kind of like that. Maybe not quite as drastic as I want. I really want to make sure I get a lot of that bright green in there. Bring it up like this maybe. Yeah, kind of something like that. And then I want there to be more bright green that's coming into play. So I'm going to bring that over. Maybe I'll actually draw it a little bit more like this. Nope, that's a little bit too much. I'm really trying to get this right here. Something like that. Maybe we'll increase the darks a little bit, and we'll increase the brights a little bit. Just really bring those really bright greens in to influence that side of our tree. All right, that's, I think, how we want to leave our colors. So what I'm going to do now with this layer, or the shape, I should say, I'm going to right-click on it, choose Arrange, and I'm just going to send it to the back. Now what we're going to do is select shapes one at a time, and we will begin using the eyedropper tool to sample from that gradient. The problem is, let me just show you this here. If I take this front triangle and I grab my eyedropper tool and I say, give me that green in the gradient, it's going to actually sample the entire gradient. That's going to be a problem. So here's what we want to do. I probably should have done this before I sent it to the back, but I'm just remembering now. I'm going to grab that gradient shape, make sure I have it selected, and we're going to go Object Expand, and we're going to expand the fill, and Illustrator knows this is a gradient, so it's saying, hey, you want to expand the gradient to what? A gradient mesh or specific objects. So we're going to specify that we want to expand this to 255 individual objects, giving us a maximum range of color. We're going to hit OK, and now all those objects are nestled within this group, right? All those objects are in there. That's great. Now what we can do is if we select a shape, like this little piece down here, we hit the letter I to grab our eyedropper tool and select that dark green. That shape, as you can see, gets filled with that dark green, no stroke. The blue stroke automatically goes away. So then you can simply go through and begin selecting each of your shapes and just use the eyedropper tool and one by one, piece by piece, begin building out the actual low poly effect for the tree here. I'm going to keep selecting these shapes even when it looks like not much is happening. Stuff's happening. Stuff's going on. The changes are being made. Let me deselect. I accidentally selected the gradient. Just got to be careful here as you're going through and selecting stuff. That's all right, though. And I'll probably speed the video up here so you don't have to watch me painstakingly select every single little piece of everything. And it's just a little bit, not really a labor of love because it doesn't take too long, but it's just a labor of precision maybe, where you got to make sure you're selecting stuff and hitting pieces where they need to be hit and all of that. Yeah, and just a moment passes pretty quickly when you can speed video up like that. And you can see we have this nice shape where it looks kind of naturally lit, right? With the brightest bits up here, the darkest bits down here. And if anything, the colors are too close, you can always select one cell. And if you go to HSB mode here in your color panel, which by the way, Flyout menu HSB, you can just bump the brightness up 1 or 2%, just very, very slightly. It makes a difference. It gives you a little differentiation, allows you to really see what's going on. So what I'll do now, I'm just going to collapse this leaves layer. I'm not going to lock it up though. I'm going to turn my ground on and I'm going to unlock it because what I'm going to do is begin lighting the ground the same way. Now, I could apply a big gradient over the ground or I could simply sample from what's already been done for me up here because we're going to use those same greens. So I'm going to select this piece of the ground over here and just get one of the kind of nice dark greens, and then I'll just slowly but surely walk it back from not so bright to getting brighter, getting brighter, getting brighter kind of thing. And I'll select maybe one of these down here, up here. All this should be pretty dark back on the back side of the hill. It really shouldn't start to get really bright until we're cresting the hill, if you will. So this triangle back here, this should still be one of these, pretty dark greens, something like that. I'll select this shape here. And I'm just using the letter I to jump me over to using the hotkey for the eyedropper tool. Grab a nice dark green there. And if you have any shape that's particularly difficult to select, you can try to hunt it down in the, it's not quite dark enough maybe, in the layers panel, see if you can find it. See, and that it's just too close to the cell right next to it. So what I'll do is come to HSB and just knock it down a couple ticks darkness-wise, and then this one becomes a little too close, so I'll knock that one down a couple ticks, and I'll knock this one down a couple, and this one over here should be probably the absolute darkest, so I'll make sure that's knocked down a little bit. This one should probably come down a couple, which means that this one should go up maybe 1 or 2, and that should go up just a little bit. So you're just, tweaking and making sure there's still some variation. And now as we crest the hill, in fact, let's begin with the brightest bits over here. So I'm going to go with a very bright green. I'm going to go with another pretty bright green there. And then, again, just very quickly, it's going to go from like very, very bright green to just, maybe not quite so dark for the next one. And the next one there, maybe it doesn't even have to be quite that bright. And so on and so forth. And you can very quickly create a pretty cool looking low poly graphic. It's really, there's nothing to it, right? Nothing to it other than it requires a little bit of time. There we go, something like that. And then remember the tree trunk is going to fall in front of this, but we're just kind of holding steady here with that for a second. I'm going to grab my move tool, and let's grab this. See this first triangle that was drawn? It's on the very bottom of everything. So if I come into my layers panel, there it is on the bottom, and it's just really hard to select it when it's down there. So I'll select it manually, and then I'll give it like a big dose of kind of moderate green. Maybe make it just a couple clicks darker, just something kind of like that. So there we have the ground. Now obviously we need to start filling in the tree trunk because that is that appears above the ground, and it doesn't look right without the tree trunk in place. So what I'll do, I can close my gradient because the tree trunk is just going to be solid colors, right? We got these 5 colors. We got 5 pieces of the tree trunk. So let's unlock the tree trunk. I'm going to begin with the bottom here. So I'm going to fill in the actual base of the trunk, and that I believe is the first color we chose. Then I'm going to select I need to get rid of the stroke, see, because I'm not using the eyedropper tool, so it's not automatically canceling out the stroke. We don't need the blue stroke for obvious reasons. Let's grab the little darkening shadow shape on the tree trunk there, dump the stroke, and we're going to give this that darker brownish color. All right. What I did was I just applied it to the stroke because I did not choose to set the foreground. I didn't choose to select the foreground, I'm sorry. So I'm going to select the foreground, then select that darker brown. There's our shadow for the trunk. Now we're going to go to the actual tree branch. Now the underlying tree branch shape needs to be the darkest of the browns that we selected. So I'm going to go with that darkest of browns, and then I'm going to dump the blue stroke. There we go. I'm going to select now the triangle shape up here. This, I believe, is going to be the lightest brown color. Get rid of the stroke, select the fill, and let's go with the lightest brown color there. And then the last piece of the stroke is going to be that medium grayish brown color. And once more, we'll select the stroke and just get rid of the stroke as well. And if I deselect, you can see here we've got a nice series of shapes that are going on. Now, if you get a little bit closer and things aren't quite lined up, you see there's just a little bit of a hairline crack there. We can either shift that shape over or just correct. That really should not have happened, but we're going to ignore it for the time being. That's just a matter of drag the path over a little bit. I don't want to get into it. We spent enough time playing with this already. What we're going to do, though, is I can probably shut the sketch off because we probably have a nice little base going on here with our tree. I'm going to speed it up, and I'm going to fill in the color for the nodes. The way that I'm working with the nodes is basically, again, the lighter colors go off to the left side of the node. The darker colors go on the right side of the node. So I'm gonna real quick speed the video up as I'm talking here. You'll see me just filling in these nodes and rocks and stuff, and it'll all look good for us. All right, so we have these very blocky looking nodes, modules, whatever you want to call them, that are clinging to the tree. To add just an extra sense of realism to all of this stuff, I want to create another new layer here, and I'm going to call this shadows. Now, we're going to probably have to have a couple shadow layers, but this shadow layer, I want this to be underneath the nodes but above the leaves. I'm going to zoom in here. I want to make sure my Smart Guides is turned on. It's up here under View. Smart Guides is still on. Good. And I'm going to grab the pen tool. And I'm just going to draw out a few sort of like shadowy type shapes and just make them link with the outermost points of my nodes. And what I'll do, double click on the properties panel here, we'll just reduce the opacity down to like 15%, maybe more than 15%. Let's go like 25%, something like that, just so they're kind of noticeable. You can see there we got a nice little shadow. And I'll do the same thing back here, and we'll create a little shadow for this. I'll bring it this way, something like that. Cool. Once more, set the opacity. Let's go with like 25% back here as well. I'll do the same thing over here with this shape. I don't know, just kind of randomize the shadows a little bit, if you will. We'll set this to the opacity of like 25 here. Now, just so it's not brightening up, maybe we'll set this to the blend mode of multiply. That'll make sure that's always darkening a little bit. So we'll select our original shape here. Well, not our original, the second shape we did. Let's set that to multiply as well. And we'll grab the first guy. We'll set that to multiply as well. You can see it just adds a little bit more kind of darkening, a darkening property to that shadow. Let's grab that pen tool once more. Let's draw a shadowy shape out of here. The shadowy shape will come all the way up to here, I think, something like that. Cool. Once more, we'll set that opacity to multiply. We probably need to, well, no, we don't need to darken it up too much. And then reduce the opacity to about 25% there. And then last but not least, we're going to get a little shadow action happening over here, something kind of like that. Once more, select opacity and set the blend mode to multiply, and we'll reduce the opacity to 25% as well. Cool, we did that. I think I want to now, I'm going to just zoom out a little bit. That looks pretty cool. Let's add some shadows for the rocks on the ground as well. So let's add kind of long, elongated shadows for the rocks, kind of something like that. We'll use that same little technique. Set the blend mode to multiply, set the opacity to let's go with like 20 here for the ground. I don't know. I'm just arbitrarily choosing to make it different. And same thing over here with this little rock. Let's go ahead and apply a little shadow for him. Boom. Opacity once more should be set to multiply. And the blend mode multiply. Opacity, let's knock it down to 20. And I'll deselect. And you can see we got some shadows there for the ground and also up in the trees. Now, a couple things we're missing. I feel like there should be some shadowing beneath the leaves and maybe even for the tree as well. But those shadows would have to go beneath both the leaves and, well, not beneath the tree layer, but the tree layer shadow will have to go beneath that. So let's do the shadow for the base of the tree first. We'll create a shadow layer just above the ground, and we'll call this tree shadow. And once more, I'll use my pen tool. And let's just create a nice long shadow for the tree, moving off this way. Kind of something like that. Voila. And we will set this to the blend mode of multiply. And we'll reduce the opacity here. I'm going to go like 15%. I'm going to make that just a little bit lower than everything else, just so it's there, but it's not like in your face. And then what we'll do is we'll zoom in and we'll create a shadow just beneath the tree layer. So I'm going to add a layer here in between leaves and tree. And I'm going to call this leaves shadow. And all this is going to be is just a couple little triangular shapes. Maybe I'll do something kind of, let's begin right here and draw this straight up to here and then over to like my anchor point there in the middle and just make it like a little triangular shape like that. Set it to the blend mode, multiply, and then we'll reduce the opacity to something that's reasonable, like 20%. That probably is fine. And then I'll draw another triangular shape over here. Something like that. That's great. Once more, we'll set the blend mode to multiply. And this time, I'll make this just a little bit darker. So I'll go like 30% opacity on this side. And then we can even draw a nice little shadowy shape somewhere around here. Something like that. Once more, of course, we're going to set the blend mode to multiply. And I'll reduce the opacity here to like, I don't know, what, 55? Something like that would probably be cool. And I can deselect. So we're just adding a little bit more shadowiness as the branch gets closer to the tree itself. And now if I zoom out, we only have a couple more things to do. I do want to throw a background behind this, and I also want to just mask the ground into place. So let's apply the background by placing a new layer underneath our ground layer, and we'll just call this BG for background. I'm going to click with my rectangle tool once, and the size of the document is 2560 by 1440. So now that I have that, I can grab my selection tool, bring up my align panel, and make sure that I'm aligning to my artboard and align the horizontal and vertical centers just like that. And we'll add a couple new swatches here for this background. So I'm going to go once more to my RGB, and I'm going to make my background run from a kind of a hot pink magenta color to more of a dark desaturated blue. So let's go with kind of one of these very rich pinky colors, but I want to make it a little bit more, a little bit more blue we'll add to it. Something kind of like that. I think that'll work. So we'll just go ahead and save that swatch. And then what I also want to do is get a very, very dark blue. So very extremely dark, maybe even somewhat desaturated blue. We'll go even darker than that. Yeah, like that. Almost black. Go ahead and create that swatch. Great. Now we have these two colors. We'll go ahead and create a gradient for the shape. Double click on the gradient panel until we see gradient. Click to apply. You can see this is our crazy green gradient. We're going to set this to linear. We're going to just drag these color stops back out where they belong. And I'm going to drag the hot pink and drop it on the light green. And I'm going to drag that really, really dark blue and drop it on that dark green. And we'll give this an angle of, let's try 90 degrees here. See how that puts the pink at the bottom? I think I want to constrain the pink or push it down even more. Something kind of like that. Maybe I'll brighten this blue up just a little bit, or just, tone it. Man, no, I really don't want to do that. Let's go back to HSB. I want to play with the hue of it a little bit. Maybe actually infuse a little brightness with saturation into it, something kind of like that. I think that sort of looks cool, and maybe we'll take that pink and we'll just desaturate it just a hair. Now that we're kind of seeing it in place, I think it could stand to be desaturated a tiny bit, maybe brightened up a little bit. Something like that looks cool. And then all we need to do, we can even use the shape we just created as our mask. So just select that shape, that gradient shape, Command or Control C, or just go Edit Copy. If you don't use hotkeys, that's fine. And what we want to do is bring all of our shapes onto or into a new layer, and we'll do that by grouping them. So we'll unlock all of these layers, and by the way, you could select each individual bit and just group it up, like if you wanted all the leaves to be grouped separately and so on and so forth. But what I want to do here, I'm just locking up the background layer so I don't accidentally select that, and we will go through, select all this stuff. We got all the little pieces, shadows, everything. We'll go Object, Group, and now you can see it's all grouped into one layer up there. Deselect, make sure we haven't destroyed anything. We haven't. And with that layer, we can now open up the Properties panel. We'll go to our opacity or our transparency panel, and we'll just double click on the little opening here. That'll add a layer mask, and I'm going to choose to paste in front, which is going to paste my sort of gradient rectangle in place, and now we're getting this weird effect, and it's because we got this weird gradient. We're going to select our fill here, double click on it, and I'm just going to choose to fill it with white and hit OK, and there it will be our tree standing on a hill all by itself. And now that I've done that, I can click opacity and just get out of my mask editing mode, select the artwork, and we're back to the artwork side of things. Honestly, it's a little wonky the way the new appearance, opacity, transform panel works in the new version of Illustrator. You can still thankfully get the old transparency panel if that's what you prefer, and that's what I tend to prefer these days, but I'll close that out now, and we'll try to play nice with the properties panel. You can see now I got these empty layers underneath where we moved all of our artwork from. That's fine. I'm not too concerned about them for right now. What I do like is how this ended up turning out. We could add a little grain or a little bit of noise or a little bit of whatever you want to add to it. But really, that's it for this one. Now, I do want to mention, if you guys do create something like this or create your own low poly sketch and convert it to low poly artwork in Adobe Illustrator, I would love it if you would share it on Instagram and tag me in the image. That way, it'll show up in my tagged images. I can get in there. I can see what you guys are creating, mix it up with you a little bit, leave a comment, drop a like, all that good stuff. I don't need some elaborate shout out, just a simple little humble tag, just so I can see it. That's all that's needed. So if you do create it, I would absolutely love to see it. That's what I'm trying to say. And for creating this low poly effect in Adobe Illustrator, beginning with the sketch, bringing it into Illustrator, tracing out a bunch of triangles, and doing all the stuff that we do with it, from gradients and sampling color and mixing it up, and matching it up, and all the good stuff that happened in this tutorial. Guys, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more great tutorials every day. Also, buy my course. It helps us do what we do, and this channel is supported by viewers just like you. You can also just click the thumbnail and watch another video from this channel. See you next time, guys.